Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Between Two Studs. I'm Alex Studd.
And I'm Ron Studd.
And Ron, tonight for episode 40, the big 40, we have Stu Gray on the line. Stu, how are you doing tonight?
Good. How you guys doing?
Doing great.
Terrific. We are so thankful that you have joined. We have a lot to talk about. Before we get started, before we go into what we call the Ember Round, Stu, we have a tradition around here. We pay homage to you and our official sponsor, Jeppson's Malort. We're going to have a shot of Malort to you. And
Sounds good. I got Gatorade.
You're hydrating, we're dehydrating.
Yep.
Cheers to you.
Cheers.
You guys too.
All right. So Stu, you have entered the Ember Rounds. And this is our opportunity to kind of peel back the curtain a little bit, get to know you a little bit, and then we'll dive deeper into the main segment of the show. So we always ask our guests, because there's always a connection, right? How did we get in touch with you? So the story is, how do the Studs know you, Stu?
So you guys came into, what was it, early June last year, to Glenns Creek Distillery, where I help my friend on the weekends. He owns a small, what you would call a craft distillery. Mm-hmm. But you guys had a bachelor party. Alex, you were. I forgot how many people did you guys have. 10.
There was a gang of us. I think it was me and 10.
Yeah.
Yeah. So usually I start off with some comment of, "Is this your first marriage?" and stuff, and everybody gets a good laugh. But and it just. You kind of remember the certain bachelor parties, so that one I stuck out because I tend to be a little more freer, and I'm unfiltered to begin with, so that's not a good thing sometimes.
No, that's what made it such a fun. I don't even know what I would call that. It wasn't a tour. It was just like
it's a conversation.
It was cutting through the bullshit and just having a real conversation about Kentucky bourbon. And I didn't even call this out, but what was I taking my shot out of?
Oh,
Glenns Creek
there you
Distillery.
go.
Glenns Creek, yeah. So Dave started the distillery in 2013, and about 4.5 years ago, I started volunteering on the weekends. I did it. A friend of mine that our daughters played volleyball brought me out there. A guy named John, who you probably met, John Kemper, and I did it for many reasons, but a lot of reasons was I went through a lot of health crises, orthopedic and cardiac, and I was kind of buying into the fact that, this is not where I want to be in my life. And I think going out there taught me I'm more than the sum of what was happening. And so I did a lot of production at the beginning, and then we started taking off and let the young guys handle the production now. But I do a lot of the tours on the weekends and the tastings. It's a great place. You guys saw it's rustic, as we call it. We're not copper and chrome and glass and pinky bourbon. Mm-hmm. But we try to be authentic.
It had charm.
Absolutely.
Stu, the same day, and I think we may have told you this, the same day. We had a bus, and it took us all around, and we did, the same day we did yours, you were right in the middle. Mm-hmm. We did
Woodford Reserve first.
Woodford Reserve and Buffalo Trace.
And then Buffalo Trace later.
And, of course, I'm not knocking those distilleries. You can, that's fine. But what I really appreciated was how authentic Glenns Creek was. It's like we're not trying to sugarcoat. We're not trying to impress you. We're here to tell you about the product. We're here to tell you the story. And I think every one of the guys that were at the bachelor party said Glenns Creek, and I am sincere when I say this, was our favorite, was our number one of the day. So.
Yeah, and I appreciate that because the guys, no heat, no air conditioning. So, you're cold in the winter, hot in the summer. But what we try to do is pull back the curtain, so to speak, and show you the man behind the curtain on the bourbon industry. And it doesn't diminish it. It's just, but there's so much marketing and hype and pretentiousness and sometimes in the industry, but it hides the fact of its roots. And its roots are basically American history. You want to know why bourbon's in Kentucky? Read the Whiskey Rebellion. There was natural westward expansion, at any rate, during the 1700s, late 1700s. But the Whiskey Rebellion comes around, and the Northeast distillers, Pennsylvania, and they basically, but most of the Northeast, and they get there was a insurrection that George Washington had to put down because Hamilton started it with his tax. And it was 20 years earlier, they're fighting a war over taxation without representation. Kentucky was under this tax in 1792, but we were on the other side of the Appalachians, a little bit further away, hard to get a marching army to. So there's many reasons westward expansion was happening, but, they land in Kentucky and Tennessee. And the birth of an industry, you had distillers, but mechanized factory bourbon was still a ways away. And I think I would have taught you about James Crow, Dr. James Crow.
Yep.
Old Crow Distillery was named after him. He never worked there. He worked in many distilleries in the area. And Old Crow was the number one bourbon for 125 years in the world. And Dave, the owner of Glenns Creek, owns 16 acres. All 16 acres that are left. There's a distilling building from 1878.
Wow.
The barrel houses that you can see from the road, 1890s. All bricks were made on site. And we have the pleasure of knowing the last superintendent that ran the place. And he shuttered it and shut it down. And, he comes by every week. His name's Bob
That's
Robinson.
Cool.
I have met you got some barking. He's just a wonderful man. He tells us about the stories of a day gone by. He and his family lived on site. They had a superintendent's house. They also had an IRS agent's house right next door that lived on site through the Reagan era. So it's a day gone by. It's the place was a massive factory, 400 barrels a day, 26 acres of grains, basically, 100 tons of coal, and Mark Twain visited there. Ulysses S. Grant drank Old Crow. Hunter Thompson, Queens, Kings, presidents, everyday people. If you read about Grant, he unfortunately drank to excess. He probably would today, I don't know, maybe a functional alcoholic. But he was Old Crow, and so these are the stories that Bob relates to us and that we hear, and we feel that we're stewards of a name. Although Jim Beam owns it, we own its heart, and its heart is the property. And that's kind of how we take it. And Dave has done a good job. You guys had the products. But it's there's more since you've been there. And it's just to me, like I said, I was buying into the fact that I was, hurt and injured in orthopedic and cardiac, and I think I've learned that that's not going to define me. So, as we say, we're kind of like the distillery. We're a little banged up, but we're still going. So,
I love that.
It's a passion. So.
I think what's really cool about what you just said, and it's so true, is bourbon history is American history. We were just talking about this before we went to air, and listeners who have multiple episodes have heard that I got married this past summer in the Pittsburgh area. But one of the things that I talked a lot about, and I'm drinking it tonight, was this idea that, the Whiskey Rebellion, before that, bourbon country was Western Pennsylvania. And Stu, you introduced that to me. I didn't know that. And what am I drinking tonight? Because that's always a question we ask our guests. I'm drinking not one of Glenns Creek's products, but I'm drinking Wiggle, which is a Pennsylvania bourbon. And so it's very delicious. But I drank this. I got introduced to this over the summer before my wedding. And I thought to myself, and I thought of you, and I said, this is probably very similar, or at least there's components of it, that the original bourbon, before they moved to Kentucky, what it tasted like.
Yeah. So one of the reasons that probably is that a higher rye bourbon. I don't know if you know the mash bill, but when they come over the Appalachian Mountains, rye is a northeast grain. So Kentucky bourbons were primarily lower rye. It had to be imported, and it was very hard to do. The other interesting thing is a lot of the distilleries, the bigger distilleries, but there are hundreds of them. I forgot the name of the book, but there's a fascinating book. They find distilleries on farms all the time, and they document the history. But the big ones, pre-automobile, pre-electric, pre-train, Ohio, the Kentucky River. Kentucky, Ohio, Mississippi, Port of New Orleans, you got the world. And you had to transport those 530-pound barrels back to your market. The market here wouldn't have sustained that. So there's, there is a lot of history. Kentucky history, definitely. With Tennessee and whiskey, the same thing. I probably dispelled the limestone water myth for you guys.
And let me set that up, Stu, because I think it's hilarious. So again, we started the morning at some of the more traditional distilleries, the ones that everyone has heard. And one of the things they all said, every one of them, said, what makes Kentucky the perfect location is because the water runs through these rivers that have the limestone bedding,
natural filtration.
It's a natural.
It's amazing.
The best quality water there is. Right?
Can't be matched anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
And then we met Stu, and what did you say about 10 minutes into the conversation?
If you believe that malarkey, then go out to the side of the road and where the water's running through the limestone. Go take your glass, fill it up, and dare to have a drink. I don't suggest that. For the record, please don't do that, because above the hill is a cow farm. And it won't filter out that stuff. No, I mean, there is water in Kentucky, obviously, but and it will make it sweet. There is a mid-1800s spring house that they used to draw water on. We used to, until the some bourbon got dumped into the aquifer by Glenns Creek. But it makes it sweet. I think it's the magnesium, but the water is alkaline. And if not for Dr. James Crow, or if he hadn't have done it, he was a Scottish immigrant, chemist. Eventually lands in Kentucky, and he works at many of the distilleries. He made basically Old Crow in 1835. It was his distillate. He never worked at the Old Crow distillery. I think he was passed by then. But Colonel Lee H. Taylor made it to honor him. But he made the sour mashing process. You have to bring the acidity. Kentucky limestone water tends to be alkaline. Yeast doesn't really work great in that environment. Bacteria will eat a lot of your sugars that you're breaking down, so you have to bring it down. Well, you have something called setback. It's been known for that couple hundred years, and setback is what's left in the still at the end of the night. It goes in this warm, fruity smelling, beautiful smelling, kind of yellow depending on the type of grains, and comes out looking, tasting, and smelling like vinegar. It's acidic. We take whatever proportion we have to do, we know it by the pH and the ratios, and throw it in the cook, and it brings the cook down. It does two things. It actually cools it down, but it also brings it down to an acidic level, maybe a 4 or 5, give or take. So now yeast is going to win the battle of the sugar, and yeast makes alcohol. People say, there's bacteria in okay, we're not a beer making operation. We go through a very hot still. Every distillery, you will find it's nothing alive or nothing solid can go across the still. It's basically pasteurization. But Dr. James Crow, from what I've read, also brought sanitation to it, and helping with the sanitation of the whole industry. So he's very influential in it. So you want to read things about bourbon, Dr. James Crow, the Whiskey Rebellion, and then some of the, as the the major distilleries are coming online, and what they survived. They survived down cycles. They've survived wars. They've survived prohibition. And cyclic. But come this, I think I told you guys, come the 70s, the World War II generation's kids are not drinking mom and dad's drink. It nosedives pretty hard. And Crow goes down with it. Crow is sold to Jim Beam, and Crow is not Crow anymore. It's Jim Beam. The property was shuttered and abandoned for over 25 years. It's absolutely stunning. If you go on the Facebook page, there's drone footage that is absolutely stunning when the sun sets over the factory. It's really cool.
Wow.
When you drive into you remember the small road, that was Millville, one of the most famous bourbon places. You roll down the window on a slightly humid, clear fall day or spring day, and for about a mile you drive through a bubble of bourbon. And it's just this wonderful smell. And you go, how can this get much better? I remember mowing the lawn one day and it was gone for about 2 hours. Just driving around the rick houses down by our neighbors in warm, bright sunshine, bourbon, and the grass you could have putted on when I was finished. I remember saying, how does this get better? It's just, so to me, it's a passion. And like I said, I probably have done less for it than it's done for me. So,
but you gave us such a wonderful introduction, and I think we took a lot away from it, as Alex mentioned. Mm-hmm. So I'm thrilled that we met you, and I'm also thrilled that you've agreed to come on the podcast. And
it's my pleasure.
And I was going to say, Ron, you are actually having some Glenns Creek tonight.
That's right. I'm having some Risky or Ryeski, depending on how you want to pronounce it. I did make sure to check with Stuart to make sure I got my pronunciation right.
What's the proof?
This is 95. 115.8.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm feeling good. For listeners to our show, I've been taking a 75-day hiatus where I haven't had any drinks besides our wonderful Malort, and I'm so thrilled to be able to drink again. So I'm thankful to be back, and thankful to also be able to drink and toast to you, Stuart. So if you won't mind, Stuart, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know that you work definitely with Glenns Creek, which is how we met you, but tell us a little bit about your passions and interests and a little bit about you, if you don't mind.
Born son of a career Army officer. Dad was Scottish, immigrated to the States after World War II, born in Panama. My brother and I traveled all around, lived in Germany when it was East and West. My dad ran the military prison over there, drug agents, terrorist agents, for the Army. Yes. So, I was defined by being a military brat. Every 3 years you go, oh, I got to move. So that defines me is being taught by by my father, who, he was a wonderful man, and unfortunately we lost him. But one of the honors of my life was to bury him at Arlington. Anybody that ever wants to see something stunning, a funeral at Arlington is sad and just incredible all at once. So those things define me. My past sports, it's what I did. Mm-hmm. I try to take away the things that I learned about it, tenacity, get the job done. Teams are stronger than individuals, although you have to be an individual at times to be successful, and every team does have individuals that step up, but I believe in the power of teams. I believe in the power that people are inherently good, and people, there are all kinds of leaders. So since post-playing days, got into basically the technical fields, and right now do engineering with a major aerospace company, and I wanted to finish with history. So part of the Orion space program. And I remember the Apollo shots when I was a kid, watching them in school. What was I, 6 in '69? So seeing those go up, and wanted to finish my career doing something that I was defined my childhood too. So being a little small, tiny part of it is going to be cool. Seeing them launch will be really cool. The men and women that all companies that work on these things will be. That is the power of teams when they put their mind to it. And maybe it erases some of the ugliness that we see in the world right now, you know. And maybe it brings back some of the hope, you know, that we had in the 60s. And I know there was dissension in the 60s. We're pretty much, probably very much like the 60s, and maybe it's time for another space program that brings us together, you know.
I was going to say, nothing like exploration and conquering new things that humanity's never done before to bring people together.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the things that NASA are doing, and the private industries, you know, Bezos, Musk, you know, Virgin Galactic, you know, I wonder personally, I don't know anything, but I wonder personally, are they ever going to all say it's going to be done together? Don't know. You know, to get to Mars is going to take a huge effort. And it just may do that. Who knows?
You know, it is interesting because I have read Musk's authorized biography. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we could talk all day about that guy. I think there's you know, people who change the world are often a little off their rocker. And I think he, in my opinion, fits into that category, but he is changing the world. Yeah. And I do believe that at this point in his life, he looks at it as his mission to save humanity. Now, the average person might say that guy's got a God complex. But regardless of what your personal opinions are, I think he realizes that humanity cannot survive being one planet. Right? We need to become interplanetary. And so it wouldn't shock me if he ends up doing a lot of partnerships, because it's going to take a lot more than just his resources to get us there.
It's going to take trillions, and so it may be beyond his resources, so he understands. But it'll be good to see. You know, I hope to see, you know, I knock on wood, I hope to see that first Mars. My dad worked at JPL, so did my mom.
Oh, wow.
My dad was one of the first program managers on the Sojourner, one of the first probes that hit got to the planet. And we always say, well, it was designed to do faster, cheaper, stronger. And we said, well, cheaper, they picked a Scot to go do that. So he saved on parachutes, and I think they bounced it off the surface with a ball.
Wow.
You know, so, you know, my dad, as he said, he was one of the first to hit the surface. The other one skipped off and went out in the atmosphere. My dad was a career military officer. What did he know about that? You know? So, you know, I had the pleasure when I was in high school to hear, you know, some of the things that they were doing. You know, my mom transitioned Doppler. Her teams helped transition Doppler to commercial airports. That was military stuff that was declassified. All of a sudden, they're bringing that online in Doppler. How many people has Doppler saved over the years? You know? So, you know, those were the things that influenced me, you know, my dad's career, but then that's kind of what I gravitated to, and space was part of it because they working at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and hearing some of the things that they were doing. So, as I said, I wanted to finish my career with history, and because history is very
and all coming full circle.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see. So, yeah, I great company, love it. People are absolutely wonderful. And then, you know, so we'll see where it goes.
So Stu, there's a lot to unpack there, and we'll get to it. But I will say, question we have to always ask our guests. always have to ask is pick a piece of art. It can be anything. Hell, it could be bourbon, right? It could be anything that represents or speaks to you in some way, and tell us about it. You know, this originally started out as we were thinking people were going to give us a book or they were going to give us like a painting. And the answers have been so diverse, and it's always fun, interest asking our guests that question.
A piece of art that means something. Germany. Oh, probably, I forgot the year. 1776, so our bicentennial, we were actually in Britain traveling around, learning that the Brits actually beat us in the Revolutionary War. But probably 75 or maybe 77. My parents, we traveled a lot, and we went to Dachau. And a piece of art is outside of the museum piece of art where it's kind of abstract. You can tell it's barbed wire and humans in the wire. And it was a commemorative to the men and women that died there. And it struck me after visiting that place, how can people do that to each other? And you know, visiting the ovens and the horrible, I mean, to this day I can remember that. It's just stark. But that piece of art is sad and enlightening and encouraging in a way, because that piece of art is on is a beacon on a ground that had so much pain that it's a beacon to how we should not be to each other. And it's absolutely appalling what is happening today in Ukraine. And it's going to take people stepping up, because if you read your history, the people, and there's no statement here, don't read into it. We didn't know. Well, you do know. Step up, speak up, and you do know. And say something. And it may cost you everything, but step up. And I don't want to see another piece of that art anywhere in my life. But the artist captured the pain. Yeah, and to me, I can remember seeing it. So,
well, and Stu, I've also seen Dachau, and I
So
always tell people, you have to experience that once in your life. Personally, I have no interest in ever doing it again unless someone wanted me to. My wife is Ashkenazi Jewish, so it is seeing those places is, I feel the same way. It's horrifying, yet I'm so thankful they're preserved and that they're going to stay preserved, because people need to see that.
Yeah, I would never go again. It made you nauseous. The ovens were nauseous. And it kind of brings back to what we've experienced in this country. We're tearing down our history to whitewash it. What you do is you put a piece of art next to your bad history. And you don't celebrate your bad history, but you put a piece of art next to it that says what that history was and why it was wrong. And you don't tear it down, because then you have the tendency to forget that these things happened. I don't believe in celebrating, things that in this history back then, but we cannot forget that these things happened. And
I think that's a common, I agree with you 100%, but I think that's a common problem where people say, oh, well, if we leave anything up, that means we're celebrating it. And I don't think that's the right way to look at it. I think we can't forget our history, and we need to remember both the good and the bad. Because ultimately the good and the bad together is what got us here.
They got us here. We have a long way to go. But having lived in many countries, I thank God for living in this country. I have been in other countries. I have felt absolutely, and I'm 7 feet tall, don't really care about much, but I have you feel insecure for your safety, your physical safety in other countries because you are a Westerner or you are whatever, you forget that. No. And I do sympathize that some people look at those things and go, so maybe we move them into an area and surround it by the whole truth. So it's not just a beacon to one ideology, and I'm okay with moving that, but you cannot forget what humans can do to each other, and look, 80 years, whatever, 45, so 80 years later, so whatever it is, we're doing it again, and we have a European war. So no, never forget, but never celebrate either. You never celebrate an ideology that abused people, that degraded people. So no, that you want a piece of art, that was a piece of art. When I saw that question, I thought long and hard, because I've seen David, Michelangelo, saw Florence, and touched the ceiling of the Duomo when you could still touch it. Shouldn't have touched it back then, but you could. Walked in cities, walked in European cities, London, Edinburgh, seen all kinds of art, but I'd say that piece of art influenced me the most. So, yeah, that was an interesting question. So,
it's a great answer, and thank you for that answer. It's something
I wish I knew the name of the piece of art. It was a sculpture.
Well, don't worry. Through the magic of editing, bing, Ron's going to post that in after editing what that is, so everyone knows. And I'll also post a link to it so you can check that out for yourself. So finally, you've got one last question for the Ember Round, and this may possibly be our longest Ember Round, which you're doing wonderfully with, by the way.
It's been well worth it. Yeah,
absolutely. So, what is one way that COVID has permanently impacted your life, and hopefully positive way? One of the things that we've said to our guests is that Alex and I started this podcast as a reaction in some ways to COVID. What's been one of the impacts that COVID has had for you, hopefully positive?
So we continued to work. We followed the protocols. It brings you closer to your family. You understand. You're less into the trappings, because all the trappings that we love doing were taken away, and actually I think you appreciate them more, and you realize maybe you don't need all of them. And I know sometimes people are like, you need to leave the house, but it brought people closer together in many ways. It made us think. I think it made us think about what we're doing. Unfortunately, it did politicize us too. But for me, it was, do we need all of this stuff in our life? Do we need to do this, that, and the other? And to me, I focused on my work and the things I loved, and I loved, like I said, going out to the distillery, good friends. We followed safe protocols, and and trying to small businesses went under, and trying to keep the distillery, make certain it was there, and it did. It thrived, and it was good to see people coming together for a common cause, and that kept me focused during that time too. So, but I guess realizing what you do and may not need in your life, all the stuff we do and all the things you got to do, this, that, and the other, and you realize maybe we didn't need it. The amazing thing was to see how fast companies got off-site, and saved their companies. Yeah. With all of the hacking going on, and I know they had a lot of deals, but that was, when you think about efforts that people have done and societies have done, that will probably one day be marked as one of a crowning moment. and it
I
forever
agree.
changed the workforce.
The agility that businesses transformed. But I liked your answer. I think it's so true. I think if there's one word that I would say to help explain the last 2 years, beyond all the horribleness, it also gave perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Perspective.
Yeah, and it's good to see. I'm going to stay away from the mask mandates and everything, but it's good to see those coming down, because I shudder to think what my grandson didn't see faces other than his own. What does that do to our children? And
We
I'm
won't
not
know
gonna,
for generations.
Yeah, we won't know. You don't pick up on. We're having this conversation, but we're reading faces. They didn't learn that. They didn't learn the facial cues. It's like having an argument over text. You may not be arguing, but
you don't know the context because you can't read that.
You might be arguing with me. I don't know you're arguing. Yeah, I'm arguing with you.
Yeah.
So we don't know what that did, and so we're going to have a lot of work with these young generation. We had separation, as we get older and stodgier, I guess, but we don't know what desocialization, so to speak, did. And so it's good to see that we're able to I know there's new variants and all that stuff, but besides that, it's good to see that we're starting to come out of the darkness, and to understand that the thing is look what this has probably taught us on the next pandemic. What did we learn, from the unfortunate AIDS epidemic, on new drugs, antivirals? You don't want human misery to do that, but look what the research has done. We probably, you have new medicines, new therapies. You have an ability probably now to arrest and help treat Ebola, which kills you in days. By the, what do they call it? The antibodies and the drugs, monoclonal or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. So new therapies will come out of this for human disease, and help with the next pandemic. And there is going to be a next pandemic, and then there'll be a next and a next. Mm-hmm. And so the learning is absolutely stunning to see people once again coming together and realizing that we need to pull together. Again, the power of teams. I always have believed in them.
You brought it back.
Will.
Yep. You made it full circle. You brought back the teams comment.
Yeah.
And Stu, with that completes the Ember Rounds. That was awesome. So that was a great introduction into how Stu ticks, at least at a high level. What we're going to do is we're going to go to break. And when we come back, I really want to talk about your professional sports career and how that also, through that teamwork that you just talked about, how that's continued to influence you. And then we're going to touch on, some of your work today. So we'll be right back, and we'll talk through that.
Okay. Sounds good.
Hey, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed the first half of this episode and the first half of Season 2 of Between Two Studs. Alex and I are enjoying some time at the beach. We're having some rest and relaxation. And we're going to be taking a small break for the next few weeks, and then we're going to come back and we're going to finish up the rest of Season 2. It's been a blast, and we're having a lot of fun this season, and we're looking forward to putting out the second half. And speaking of second half, we're going to be getting back to the rest of this episode in a moment, and it was a blast working with Stuart on it, and I hope you enjoy the rest of it. Thank you.
And we are back with Between Two Studs. We're hanging out with Stu Gray, and Stu, I have to say this before I go into the first question. Outside the Ember Round, I have to give you sort of a little context, a little setting the ground, right? So the first time I met you, the only time I've actually met you in person, Ron and I and a group of others, as we mentioned, we walk in and we see you sitting at the bar, and you're sitting, but I could tell that you're a relatively large man. Now, Ron and I are both 6'2", 6'3", in our entire lives, there's nothing more annoying than someone asking to us, "Oh, did you play basketball? Did you play basketball?" Yeah. And so knowing that as someone who's 6'3", and I saw you, and I could tell immediately you were bigger than that, the last thing I was going to do was going to ask, did you at any time in your life play basketball? But it turns out you actually did. Yeah. So can you tell us your basketball journey from high school to UCLA and then on to the NBA?
Yeah, kind of a journey, because as we discussed, my dad was military. So 78, we come back from Germany and to LA, where he's going to be the ROTC commander at UCLA, where I ended up playing at and going to school at. But we actually went to the wrong school district. My parents had bought their first house ever in the San Fernando Valley, and literally they asked my parents to move. We were a block away from their district. I ended up going to a school called Kennedy High School. One of my teammates was a gentleman by the name of Darren Day, who was an All-American and played at UCLA too, went on to play some in the pros. So I this was, you played basketball, you played baseball, it was something I did. And all of a sudden I didn't do any of the small bitty leagues where they're seeing all these guys that had played there. And at that time I was 6'10", and then eventually my junior year I was the first 7-foot center in I think they thought, it was in the LA Unified School District. And remember, I'm going from military schools to wide open LA public schools. So no rules. If you messed up in an Army school, your dad's career was over. Great coach, a guy named Dean Cadwell. You were a citizen of the world first and a ball player second. I got an S, satisfactory, when they used to do those. Remember those? Mm-hmm. And yep. He threatened to bench me because I got an S. But straight A's weren't good enough. I got an S. So I had to explain my life away on that one. This man was everything to me. Learned a lot from him. Basically his goal was, Stuart, if you get to be an All-American, you'll get your jersey retired. That was my goal. It wasn't to go to UCLA. I wanted my jersey retired.
In high school?
And, yeah. And, Dr. J and all those guys, ABA players, NBA players, were on my wall as a kid. Mm-hmm. So go to UCLA. I did it because, I didn't want to move. Recruited, Stanford, Berkeley. All my other family goes to Berkeley, so I was the traitor. Mm-hmm. So I just did not want to move one more time. Wasn't a good choice. Love the school, but just it was a program in total disarray at that point.
So you were like the easiest recruit ever, yeah. Right? Like it was just like, I'll go there. I don't care about the coach. I just want to stay local.
Well, Larry Brown, I committed to him, and he literally left 2 days later. After my dad said, "Your reputation is that you leave," he literally left 2 days later or something like that. And so, we'll leave it at that. That was bullshit, though. So it just was not a good experience. Total disarray, different era. And so my dad, you committed to something. He was Scottish, colonel in the Army, and you didn't leave. And years later, he told me, he was sorry that he gave me that advice. He said, you should have left and gone and had a college experience that you should have. I was All-American in high school. Michael Jordan, Patrick Ewing, Chris Mullin. That was my year, 81. Wow. If you guys want to look it up, there's some serious players. In the 84 draft,
NBA draft, is considered one of the best of all time.
Yeah, so of course, I put my name in for that draft because, I've had such a great career.
Hey, you're on the list.
Yeah.
But I could, I was 7 feet, 250, played, 235 in college, could play down to, I could cover two guards, and I could run, but now I can't run very well. And then play defense, specialized in defense, rebounding, could shoot, but just was in an offense that was not going to get me the ball. So, my first game, I think I told you guys, 13 points, 10 rebounds, something close to that. Next day, great failure. Did not live up to Jabbar and Walton. Well, okay, yeah, because they didn't play as freshmen,
right?
So it was never read a paper, especially an article about yourself. So anyway, career was there, but one game I finally just said, the hell with it. 22 points, 13 rebounds, whatever. Like it was nothing because I didn't care when I knew I was going to leave and I was going to quit. So I was not, my dad flat out refused to, but I will say that whatever you're drinking right now, I probably had a lot of it. And I wrote the letter and I said, I basically quit to the NCAA. If you wrote the letter back then, there's none of this stuff that they get now. Oh, I can come back and go and look and not do this. You were finished. And that was my intent.
Did you have to put it in the postal mail and it goes to headquarters? Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
My one of my best friends in the world, Trip Sheehan, was the manager. Still really good friends with him, roommate. I could. Yeah, it was probably just I quit big scribble and so I thought nothing of it. Yeah, great, I'm done. I told my dad the next day, and my dad was a man of few words, and he looked at me and says, "Life will teach you a lesson," and that's all he said. Months later, I'm at home in Pasadena, and he goes, "You need to go answer the door." And so my first thought is it the police? What did I do wrong?
What did I do?
Yeah. What did I do?
Who's got one on me?
Yeah. So it's the media, and they want to discuss. And I said, look, I have nothing to say. You guys didn't want me here to begin with, so I have nothing to say. And I'm like, I got drafted? Yeah, fairly high, 29. And
wow.
I was like, oh, dear God.
So back in those days, they didn't call you to say you got drafted by.
I didn't get any call. No, I found out.
They just showed up.
Yeah, my dad had when he got this Cheshire cat smirk on his face, and I remember that shit-eating grin he had. Like, life will teach you a lesson. So, so that was, because everybody, you're not going to make it. What did you do to earn this, that, and the other? Los Angeles Times doing their horse manure. Great. I gave you what you guys wanted. Why are you mad now? Because I left. I think it was at that point only two players, me and another player. I think maybe Kermit Washington. And I didn't even pretend to think I was as good as Kermit, and I just, thought I would quit. And that was a good way to do it without quitting, because you couldn't quit. That would go against my code. So I got drafted, and that kind of segues into, I got drafted because of a gentleman by the name of Mel Daniels. And Mel had seen what I did to a guy when he tried to beat up one of my players, one of my teammates. And so I never start a fight. That's wrong. But I'll finish it. I'll take care of you. We can play nice or we can play bad. I don't care. Whatever you want to do. I was raised in Army communities, officer's son. You fought your way onto every base. And my brother couldn't fight, so I did his too. He had the mouth, and he would say, no, you don't fight me, you fight Mongo. And Mongo was me. And I think he took advantage of that too many times. But
I was gonna say, I need a friend like you still.
Yeah.
I can pick a fight, and I got a buddy to take care of it.
Yeah, and again, never start a fight, but you'd be surprised how much you can antagonize somebody into wanting to swing at you. So, as I used to say in the NBA, I was on their speed dial with the league security. They
so
just pressed 2.
So I just want to, and I didn't mean to derail, but so NBA Hall of Famer Mel Daniels didn't care about your performance as a player. He said, this guy is a guy who protects his teammates.
We're getting our ass kicked every night. He can rebound, play defense, and he's the hard-nosed SOB. And
draft him.
Yeah, draft him. And they probably thought Mel was smoking something, but he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And so, I be out in Indiana, dead of summer, and meet Mel. So somebody from the Pacers drops me off from the hotel. I mean, Indiana summer is hot and humid. This bastard turned off the air conditioning. And it's me and the ball boy and Mel. And he did where he sits in the middle, tosses you the ball, and you lap the court doing layups each end. And I wasn't going to quit because I wasn't going to give him satisfaction. And I knew he was testing me, but I made it 45 minutes before I got ill and went and threw up.
Wow.
And Mel's, I think, my recollection is Mel's like, oh, well, I thought you'd last 10 minutes. I was like, we can go again. I probably called him a bad name. And now he said, put up your hands. So I'm thinking he's like, put up your hands, like, show me how to play defense. And he goes, no, damn it, put up your hands and try to hit me. I was like, you got to be crazy. I'm not going to hurt you. He goes, son, you won't hurt me. Mel was 6'10", massive man. When he shook your hand, he'd crush it.
Yeah.
And Mel was...
And this is you saying this, a 7-foot tall man.
Yeah.
Right.
And Mel was, because he was skinnier when he played, but afterwards he rode horses and all the hay and farm work, he was big. He was a big man. As you guys said, he's a poet. And no one knew that he was a poet. Nicest, gentle giant you can imagine, but I think I tried to take a swing at him, and he batted it away like a fly. And he said, I'm going to have to teach you how to defend yourself, because the first game, they're going to try you. And how you defend yourself or don't defend yourself, that's how the referees are going to let people play against you. So one of the first games was the Bad Boys of Detroit. Okay. I hate that term. You don't scare me. And, you knew who I was playing.
Yeah.
Ron, do some research on who I was playing. And I was going to take that course.
Okay.
So we get into it. There's a fight. And I do the worst mistake. I turn my back on this guy's teammates. Rule number 1, never turn your back on their friends. Mm-hmm. And I'm turning around going, oh, this is going to hurt. And I look up, and Vinnie Johnson has Mel by the tie, swinging him. And Mel's turning purple. And eventually they break it up. But he didn't wear a clip-on tie. So you wear a clip-on tie because it flies off.
Yeah.
So I think, memory, this is almost 40 years ago. Mel said something like, I told you to make it ugly. What in the hell were you doing? I said, I was making it ugly. He goes, do you speak English? I said, yeah, just because you got your butt kicked doesn't mean I can. I love this man. He was, he died the same year as my father in 2015, and it was like losing a father all over. This guy, I got to tell you, when my daughter passed a few months before he died, he called up. I have his voice recording on my phone to this day. And he said, you have to be equally as strong as you were as a player. So his last piece of advice to me in this world was to be strong for your family. So even as towards the end of his life and years later, we always stayed in touch. And when and a lot of guys feel this way about Mel. And they had, when he left, there was just a big hole in a lot of people's hearts. So when talking to you guys about why this story is important, because people need to know that this man was, he was a good man, and he influenced a snot-nosed little brat that didn't want to be there, and he taught me self-respect in basketball again, because I was trying to end it wrong, and he told me that. And he told me, if you listen to me, you'll play as long as you want. If you don't, you'll last 3 games. I think I asked him, the check's good. He goes, this will be a life you will never forget. And he wasn't wrong. And the 5 years I had with him, and then the years afterwards, just whenever we would catch up with each other, it was like you saw each other yesterday. Slim, excuse me. Slick was the coach. Slim was his name.
Well, most people don't think of NBA Hall of Famers as poets who've written over 20,000 poems.
No.
And was a particularly big fan of Edgar Allan Poe.
Mm-hmm.
So this was not your typical person.
No, Mel was a dying breed of old school basketball is what we used to call it. So we used to play games afterwards, and these guys were still in good shape. So Mel, a guy, you'll look up these names, Bob Nedelicki, Roger Brown. These guys were ABA champions, and they were still in very good shape. Roger Brown, I think he's now in the Hall. I think he's in the Hall, but he was not allowed into the Hall for something he never did, and blackballed. But eventually that got cleared. But Roger, I have never seen someone shoot that pure, and he had been retired maybe 6, 7, 8 years too. So I got to play against heroes. I got to play against the guys on my wall, Dr. J. I remember getting a rebound. I'm screwing up as a rookie, barely 21, kicking the ball out. I'm screwing up the whole game, nervous, and our guard bobbles it, and Doc picks it up, and I'm backpedaling. Nobody, he and I. Okay, I've seen this poster. I had it on my wall. I was like, I'm not making your poster. So all I could think to do was step out and grab. Now, anybody else would have got thrown to the ground, but this is Doc. No, he gets put down gently, dusted off, and Doc knows. And I just, he just, he knew I was screwing up, and words of encouragement during the game, like, Rook, you could have body slammed me, I know that, but just play the game, I remember seeing his retirement. Lasted about 3 hours in the Spectrum, so I got to live what I wanted to live. And that's why I told you guys, if it has, and your journey, if it is something you dream, then dream big and go for it. But it can't hurt anybody else or yourself. And if you do that, you can live your dreams. And I did. I wasn't Hall of Fame, but I got what I wanted out of that. And it makes me the person I am today, Yeah, I was the guy you met if you wanted to cause problems. So that was my job.
Well,
so,
kind of sticking with that, I think you've already given a lot of great advice, but what would you say to anyone listening who does have aspirations for basketball or maybe some other sport?
Get your education, have a backup plan, because the odds are stacked against you. I don't know the stats. I thought it was 1 in 3 million or something when I was playing. The odds are so astronomically skewed that you need to have a backup plan. At 32, I didn't realize I would be retired. I had a whole year of school to go, and the internet was just starting. Al Gore hadn't made it then. Sorry, I resist. Actually, he was actually a part of that, because I made a wise crack to that to one of our IT guys, but he was involved in that. But so going back to school was in the summers. Well, I was in training camp always during the summer. So when I retired, I took a few months off just to get healed from all the injuries, and then I went back to a school in northern Indiana. At that time, I was going through a divorce, and I wanted to be around my daughter. It was a Jesuit college. I mean, that was hardest thing I've ever done, because Jesuits are the scholars.
Yeah.
And so I went through a degree completion program, got my degree. So that gave me options. Without options, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today.
If you don't mind me asking, too, I'm curious which university it is, because our father, he went to another Jesuit university, and my wife, she got her master's at the University of Scranton, which is another Jesuit university, and my father's St. Bonaventure.
Yeah, so Calumet College in St. Joseph. It used to be Calumet College of St. Joseph. I think they shortened the name. It's in Whiting, Indiana, right on the lake, just on the other side of the border from Chicago. So, I mean, hard. We were, the degree completion. What are you going through a class every 9 weeks or something like that? Organizational management. You have to do almost a research paper at the end, but very hard. I hadn't thought about that, but I knew I needed to level the playing field, because now I'm, give or take, because I played 1 year semi-pro clearing a contract, and that was straight out of North Dallas 40 movie. If you ever haven't seen that movie, it's a good movie. But then 1 year in East Dumpton, and so I'm basically 10 years behind my peers. And the only way I know how to erase an advantage is get an advantage. And so I, get my education, get into the first job.
You didn't want to finish your degree at UCLA?
No, but my daughter was in the Chicago area, so I needed to be around her. So I stayed, and eventually got custody of my daughter. So we'll just kind of read between the lines on that. So got custody of my daughter and raised her. Stayed in the Indiana area, basically moved back to Indianapolis. Got remarried, so we have 5 children altogether. I told you my oldest daughter passed away, but I have a young son, stepson. I don't use the word. I raised him since 2 years old. He's like a son. He's a great kid. In IT, by the way, so cybersecurity portion of it. Daughter's finishing school, and my oldest daughter, I told you what she does, and she has a second grandson on the way. So they probably will have 2 7-footers. So I can't.
Congratulations to that.
Yeah. I've been forbidden from teaching them how to fight. Yeah. Well, they can't watch them.
I can only imagine why, right?
Yeah.
So speaking of your height advantage, I know that you are legally a giant, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the downsides of being so tall?
Hitting your damn head on everything. So,
I got to say, before you go any further, Stu, the first thing I thought of was at the beginning of the recording. You talked about all your world travels, and I was thinking, how the hell is this guy on an airplane?
Yeah, that's got to be really a challenge.
Airplanes are the worst, but in Europe, going through Europe, my parents liked every cathedral and castle in Europe. Well, they were all 5'4" back then.
Right.
So adored.
So you're like
down a steep steps, Heidelberg Castle, hit the stone top of the door, out cold. Permanent scar, blood everywhere. Yeah, it's like these people were very tall back then. But you deal with it. But yeah, so other disadvantage, orthopedic. But a lot of that is what I did playing too. So you will. They don't advertise that portion of the job description. Would I do it again? Hell yeah. Would I do it smarter this time? Yeah, I would do it smarter. But it was the way we did it. You just played. So it was different back then. Yeah, I'm glad that what I am glad about sports today is that they have better concussion protocols, because a lot of guys, probably me included, you took massive hits, and you didn't have a helmet or anything, but even helmets don't save you. But you took massive hits. I lost 4 teeth in one hit into my own teammate's elbow.
Wow.
I bit into his elbow.
Just to check, this wasn't hockey, right? You were playing basketball.
Yeah, my own teammate, we collided. I bit his elbow. He pulls them out, and I see my teeth stuck in his elbow.
Oh my God.
At which time he freaks out and sends them flying. I'm holding my mouth, and I just want my teeth.
Oh.
My teeth. It was, Then years later, friggin' Reggie Miller stops right in front of me. He's my teammate at the Pacers. And they put those teeth back in, stopped.
And he was a teammate of yours at UCLA too, right?
Yeah. I knew that little snot nose, but he was a good guy. He's a great guy. But he's an obnoxious freshman. Just totally obnoxious. So he stops right in front of me his rookie year. I hit him and crack off one of those teeth that I had lost.
Oh.
They need me playing that game, so literally go into the thing and they yank it out with what I thought were needle nose pliers, and you need to get back in there and play. Yeah,
I don't think they tell you about that when you're a fan watching NBA games. They don't tell you about what's going on behind the scenes in the locker room.
I mean, that sounds like something out of Rocky, where it's like, all right, let me get some super glue, but get your nose back. Don't worry, I'll go back in. I'll be fine.
College, I got hit so hard in the nose that it split over here, and I'm bent over holding my face. And I get up and I can't see anything, and I'm thinking like I may have lost my vision, and I hear, "Oh God," from the referee. And I like, what? And he goes, "Son, you got it. You got it." And evidently, if you cut it hard enough, the whole cheek falls down.
Oh my! And,
and so they
You're grossing me out still.
Yeah, they just go sew it up and go back in. So yeah. So this is the part when people say, "Oh, you guys make too much money." Yeah, well, does that happen in your job?
Not so much. OSHA probably want to prove it if it did.
No, there's not a lot of OSHA.
So one of the more serious things that we've talked about before we started recording is that in the NBA, especially a lot of players who are taller, like yourself, certainly have gone through a lot of cardiac issues, and that's not something that's really maybe widely advertised. Would you mind talking us through a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, it is something that's important to me because it's important for everybody. But so where the NFL has CTE, the brain injuries, basketball does have that too, but not as prevalent. So we are a lot of cardiac deaths. Start going through and looking at guys, and 50 to 65, a lot of them are passing away. Moses, Daryl come to mind quickly, and a lot of it is cardiac. Reggie Lewis unfortunately passed away young. So it is. They don't know if it's height. They don't know if it is when you were younger, illness, nutrition. I've heard everything from NSAIDs, anti-inflammatories, to a lot of things, but they know a lot of tall guys. And a lot of it is also battling AFib. So a lot of the tall guys will have AFib. And I've battled that for probably longer than I thought, but '05. And so I wasn't going to gross you out. 3 ablations and 33 cardio versions, where they light you up like a Christmas tree. And I said, I'm done. So I elected to go the pacemaker route, which doesn't cure AFib, but it prevents racing, the symptom of your heart racing. And so, I was fortunate that it got diagnosed, because it can be fatal undiagnosed. But what I also tell people is no matter what age, we lost our daughter to sudden cardiac death, and we did not understand how prevalent it is among young people under 35, under 40. And so, people need to realize.
You'd mentioned she was only 30, correct?
Yeah, I think 30 at the time. And so it's important that even young, you need to understand cardiac health and cardiac, remembering that you'll also be older one day too. So good cardiac health is eating appropriately, a lot of caffeine, smoking, all that stuff adds up. And it takes, so it is a passion. It's one of my other passions is that, if, to remind people to take care of themselves. I'm 100% pace. So without this pacemaker, it doesn't. But it changed this. My doctor changed my life for the better by suggesting this treatment, and I feel I have my freedom back. And that was part of the thing that led me to go out to the distillery. It wasn't just orthopedic. So it was cardiac, and she gave me my freedom back. And so what I do tell people is you need to understand what you do now is going to dictate your heart health later. So heart health to me and heart conversations are very important, because who would have thought a 30-year-old would die? It's basically like your heart reset itself like a computer. And tragic, but it happens actually more than people think. So do you worry about it? No. You just talk to your doctor about it. Do I need to be tested? Do I have family history? If you don't know your family history, go get your family history. Understand what your grandparents, what your parents, both my parents have AFib, so they think maybe genetic too. They're starting to think there is a genetic component to it. So, I appreciate you guys bringing that up. I know it's kind of a sad subject, but you saved one person by talking about it.
Stu, I appreciate you sharing your personal story. I think a lot of people, I'm 30, and I think a lot of people my age, and especially younger, we have this perception that we're invincible. I hate to say it, but it's sort of, we're young, we're healthy. And I think it is a good reminder that you never know. Not to mention, guess what? If you're lucky, someday you will get old, and there are repercussions of what you did when you were young.
And it has a lot to do with what you do. So the biggest thing, if you're smoking, find a way to quit. I know that sounds easier than it's said and done. I will rat on myself. When I was going through divorce and custody, I took up smoking. It was the hardest thing I had to do. But, and I was one of like 3% that started smoking after 30. So I do things backwards. But I know how hard it was. But it was, it was something that I had to do. And so, so it's just a good reminder. And if this convinces one person that hears this podcast and they ask their doctor about, hey, I've been feeling some palpitations in my chest, good. Then this conversation did something correct. So, but otherwise, I tell people, don't worry about it. Just ask, get it. I think with the young guys your age, they forget that you should have regular health screenings.
Get an annual physical.
Yeah. And yes, this is one of the things that I think, don't really want to touch on politics, but yes, there are things that I think we should figure out how to do. and that's get people the proper health care they need. How we do it, I'll leave that up to another debate. But I think that, that's one of the things that I think should be. I don't know how to universally do it, but hell, we're sending people to Mars eventually. I think we can figure it out.
Well, and on that note, we have to talk about some of the really exciting work that you're doing, that you're involved with as it relates to space exploration missions. Are you able to share some of that with us?
Yeah, some of it. So I work for Honeywell, and Honeywell does many things, but working on the Orion program. I'm not an engineer, so I do what I do is called cost takeout, meaning you try to make these programs efficient. I've been doing engineering for almost over 20 years, setting up operations, transforming operations, mentoring leaders, setting up new leaders. I set up our India operation in Hyderabad over in India. That was kind of cool, actually. I know how things are run efficiently. I guess it's a lot to do with teams, how teams are built. So a friend of mine, we used to work together at my old company, gave me a call, and I wanted to finish with history, and I wanted to be a little bit part of it, a little small part of it.
Yeah.
But the true heroes are the engineers and the technicians and the astronauts and NASA and all the primes that are involved in this thing. But I watched these fly in the 60s, when I was a young kid, just absolutely fascinated. And I know I'm coming to the, tail end of my career. Still have a lot left, but I wanted to be a part of something that I could tell my grandkids and say, I was a part of that. And I mentioned earlier that my parents were at JPL, so I'm kind of following somewhat in that path. So look pretty soon for a flight. And they're the Artemis missions, and you can Google them and find them. That'll be the Artemis missions. And it's to prove to get back to the moon, because the moon will be what they think is integral to Mars. And
wouldn't the idea that would be it'd be like a stopover, right?
Yeah, way station, gas station.
Yeah.
Resupply. Probably more things than we even know about. They know there's ice on the moon, the surface. Ice, is water. Water can be converted. Water is necessary. Also, one of the elements of ice is O2, or water is O2. So a lot of things that you need to do that. And then I'd sure love to see the first one fly to Mars. That would be cool. And what do we do with it from there? I don't know. I do know that they're also looking at asteroids and minerals and precious rare earth metals on some of these asteroids. If you can believe it, some of them are worth trillions,
Yeah.
You will see mining, stuff that was comic book, I'm going to date myself, Buck Rogers type stuff.
Sure.
And these, NASA and Elon and Bezos and there's going to be more. There's going to be whole industries serving this. And will it, I kind of, I don't know anything, but in my opinion, maybe they team up. Remember the power of teams? That would be kind of cool. And each one specializes in something. One is heavy lift, one is crew transport, one is people transport, shuttling back and forth to low orbit, Earth orbit. Who knows? The endless possibilities of what they're going to do. And like I said, maybe it gets us thinking about being better too. Yeah. Bringing back the can-do attitude that what did Kennedy say? We'll reach the moon in this decade with that Boston Massachusetts.
Right, and we'll do it. We'll do that and the other
yeah.
things, not because they're easy, but because they are hard,
Yeah.
and we can do
Yeah.
it. Something to that effect.
So maybe it's time to get back to that.
And that's exciting because I lucked out. I know I got to go to space camp as a kid, and I was really thankful for that pleasure. But one of the unfortunate realities during the 90s, they pulled all of us kids aside and they said, all right, we got to be real with you for a second. NASA doesn't have much of a budget. It's the truth. And
They
thankfully,
said that to you as a kid?
They did. They told us that. And that's where I'm like,
Appreciate
well,
the
I'm going
honesty.
for business because that's what I did. I went for a degree in marketing. But one of the things that I have to ask for you today, as somebody who is in aerospace, who is actually helping with the future, I have a niece who really, really is interested in space. And I'm happy, too. This summer, I'm going to take her to Huntsville. We're going to have a great time in Huntsville. But for people who are younger, who are looking to get into aerospace, what would be some guidance that you would offer for them?
Take the STEM classes, math, science, biology, because you're going to need biologists up there. You're going to need doctors up there. So it's all of the STEM classes. They're making big pushes. So education is important. I mean, but, never forget that humanities is important too. But you also have to remember you have to pay your student loans off afterwards too. So
Very true.
So, but it's probably taking a lot of STEM, and depending on age, they have all kinds of organizations. Someone I work with donates his time to a robotic club where they make robots. I remember my niece, programming a robot. It's probably 20 years ago now. Programming robots, simple things like that. Getting interested in how things work, why things work. So that's where I would go, is building enthusiasm, go to Huntsville, see the rockets, see the technology, touch the technology. Getting that enthusiasm for what it can be. And so that's kind of what I'd say. Everything they do, like I said, they'll be doing multiple Artemis missions. Go have her read about them. They may, I don't know when the next launch. It's going to be soon. Don't know the exact date, but go read about it and go see a launch. I've never seen a launch. I never saw the shuttles launch. I can't wait to go see one. And they say the power of these rockets going off, just the ability of man to do right with rocket technology instead of wrong,
Yeah.
So we're seeing wrong right now, but no, it's that's what I do, is build the enthusiasm, and then she will take it from there. And you never know. I mean, she may be part of NASA, or she may teach the next astronaut, and you don't know. No one knows what their destiny is, but they help make it. I do know that. So,
well, Stu, I was going to say, this has been, and I mean this sincerely, this has been an inspiring conversation. I will say this. I have to end on, I heard a rumor that you may or may not have caused a riot in Malaysia.
I was framed.
We have to end the show on this. I have to hear the story. Everyone has to hear the story. What happened?
The rule, the second person that throws the second punch is the one that gets blamed.
So true.
Yeah. Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, all-star team, college, pre-Olympic, basically USA basketball. So they're looking for Olympics in between. We played in Korea, and we played in Kuala Lumpur. literally an open air gym that had a roof, but it was not air conditioned, so you would sweat so much the floor always had to be mopped up. So multiple Far Eastern countries, Australia, and we're playing Taiwan, and so we'll leave any racial connotations out of it or anything. But we're up by 50, and now we're trying to finish the game, but not embarrass them by not playing, but not embarrass them by opening up the score anymore. You just take normal shots, but you're not pushing as hard now. Right. And so you don't embarrass them not playing, don't embarrass them by... So 3 seconds left, they call a timeout. Why? All during the game, there's whistling in the stands, and overseas, whistling is booing in some countries. And there's jostling in the stands. So there's some things going on in the stand.
Wait, so let me just recap. You're hot and sweaty.
Yeah. You're
playing a game at this point out of respect to the players, the opponents, right?
Not trying to blow up the score, not trying to shoot stupid shots to embarrass them. Just play, but not push, and trying to run it out.
You're playing civil. There's 3 seconds left. You want to go home, and they call a timeout.
Yeah, why?
Got it.
And this is why I got framed. So I'm back on the court, and I was hot, so I was bent over, holding my knees, and they inbound the ball, we inbound the ball. I knew it wasn't going to come to me, and the next thing I know, I'm holding my mouth, and I can't think straight, and I'm spitting out parts of my teeth, and I'm like, what just happened? And then I see the guy going for another roundhouse. So I grabbed him, and the one flipping shot that the photographer can get is me.
Oh.
Now I gotta say it was a damn good hit. But he rounded. So evidently he roundhouse kicked me, and when I was level where it was easy, and he was about ready to do a second one. That potentially could have killed me. He went down. I get hit in the head with a chair. I turn around. They had broken apart their bench. Yeah, broken apart their bench, and now their plan comes into play. Chairs are flying. Now the stands are starting to erupt. Bottles coming out, and the only way out of this gym is through the stands. But I started this fight. So all of our team takes off. Crowds coming down, fight amongst the people in the stands, which is really weird. And, we're getting cut up. And we get surrounded, 4 of us. Myself, Michael Young from Houston, and I can't remember the 2 others, but we're like, we're going to have to get out of here. So we just, anybody get in your way, they're down. We get out and get into the lobby, and as the riot police are coming in, with the bamboo poles, mowing people down, with the ambulance behind them and the stretcher bearers.
Oh my God!
We are cut up from glass and stuff. We find the rest of our team that took off and left us and locked in a room. And we come in there, and I remember telling one of the guys, he was like, "Oh man, glad we got out of here." I was like, "Yeah, you guys left." He was taller than me. I said, "You're the biggest guy in this country, and you're the first one out the gym because I saw your butt leaving." Anyway, I'm now thinking I'm in a foreign country, Taiwan, Malaysia, and all those different cultures.
Sure.
I can feel the crosshairs on my back. And I'm like, give me my passport. I want to get out of here before I'm arrested. I didn't do anything wrong. And I told him.
No.
He said, whatever you guys saw, and I said, look at my teeth. I had cracked molars when he hit me like this and split the front surface of my teeth. And, no, we have to run this tournament, Goodwill and stuff like that. And I said,
oof.
Unless I get a guarantee that I'm not going to be arrested. I said, I want to talk to my dad. Because my dad used to do this overseas, and he said, it sounds like you have protect. You protect. He goes, don't go. Don't go walking around. And he goes, I know what you want to do.
You're gonna, as a white 7 foot tall guy, you're gonna stand out.
Yeah.
So evidently the interpreter. This is a long time ago, but the stands was because there was Malays in the stands and Chinese nationals in the stands, and there was animosity. So this was like a clash, and it was already brewing.
Oh.
And there was already, because they were fighting each other in the stands, and there was more going on than we knew. And then the Taiwanese team had done it before. And evidently I was told that they'd gotten an Australian kid, and he broke his leg in how many other places. Long time ago recollection, close enough. I do remember they go, well, we got to restart the tournament the next day, and you got to shake hands with them. I said, if you get me within 3 feet of them, this starts again.
Yeah.
So literally, there was 2 guys holding my arms, and all I could do is when the karate expert came up, I just shook his hand like Mel would have, and just said, don't ever let me find you.
Wow.
Because, I'm sitting there with teeth that are broken. That it took me years to fix the damage, but I got accused for doing that. Yeah, so that was funny, interesting. Funny thing is, Vern Fleming became my teammate years later on the Pacers. Because he goes, you're the craziest person I've ever met. It's like, Vern, I was a victim. Vern was right behind the tall guy getting out of the gym. I love Vern. He's a cool guy. But I was maligned, but that's what happened. But no one knows it because I get the picture. So
that's how it goes.
That's an insane story. And selfishly, I wish it would have happened in 2022 because you would be like the biggest viral YouTuber.
Right?
Everyone would
taking a blood sport kick to the face with a roundhouse.
You didn't do enough research on YouTube.
I need to go find that video of that.
No, not that video.
We'll find it at some point.
Stuart Gray, Lakers, and you will find something. Call me up after you find it.
Oh, we definitely will. Listen, this has been a real pleasure. Stu, honestly, Ron and I are so appreciative that you came on, and it's amazing the power of when we met in person last June, and here we are, now you're on the show, and you told us some great stories, some really important lessons, and things we should all take to heart, like your heart. So I really appreciate, you being on the show, and that's it. Thank you so much.
No,
thank you.
People meet each other for reasons. I've met very good friends, and you guys are now friends. You have my contact information. I wish you all the success. If I ever think of someone you should potentially interview, and matter of fact, I have. I will email it to you. She's a wonderful person. And was very influential, another influential person, but has inspired and helped the lives of many athletes. So I will give you her name, and you guys figure out what to do. But she's a close friend. But she helped me when I was that snot-nosed little idiot that didn't know anything. But you become friends. So I'm appreciate the opportunity and share some stories, and we'll see you soon, I hope. So
absolutely. Ron and I need to get up to bourbon country again soon. And of course, if you're ever in the Chicago area or the Atlanta area for that matter, please let us know.
Yeah. Well, Chicago definitely, because my wife is from Chicago, so I definitely, in Atlanta, you never know. So I'll let you guys know, but probably Chicago will be sooner. So, well, guys, thank you very, very, very much. You guys let me be me. I'm unfiltered, but you try to be the best version of yourself in this world. Sometimes you do it. Sometimes you need to work harder at it, but you try.
This is so much
No better
fun.
way to say that.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
And with that, we will wrap this episode. Thank you so much.
Cool.